Il senso religioso o l'esperienza religiosa è innanzitutto un fatto, un fenomeno obiettivo, un fatto reale, non è un'idea, innanzitutto non è un modo di sentire, non solo si tratta di un fatto, di un avvenimento, ma del fatto più imponente e più inestirpabile della storia dell'uomo. Più imponente, più vasto, che neanche il fenomeno dell'amore dell'uomo e della donna, che neanche il fenomeno del rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perché il senso religioso è un avvenimento che pone, che afferma o che ricerca l'orizzonte entro il quale acquisti senso anche il rapporto tra l'uomo e la donna, anche il rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perciò è più vasto, perfino di quelli.
Sosteniamo le donne e gli uomini impegnati nello sviluppo delle imprese e delle attività professionali, con il desiderio di affrontare le sfide imprenditoriali, sociali e culturali del nostro tempo, contribuendo al bene comune. Compagnia delle Opere. Un criterio ideale. Un'amicizia operativa. cdo.org.
Il senso religioso o l'esperienza religiosa è innanzitutto un fatto, un fenomeno obiettivo, un fatto reale, non è un'idea. Innanzitutto non è un modo di sentire, non solo si tratta di un fatto, di un avvenimento, ma del fatto più imponente e più inestirpabile della storia dell'uomo. Più imponente, più vasto, che neanche il fenomeno dell'amore dell'uomo e della donna, che neanche il fenomeno del rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perché il senso religioso è un avvenimento che pone, che afferma o che ricerca l'orizzonte entro il quale acquisti senso anche il rapporto tra l'uomo e la donna, anche il rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perciò è più vasto, perfino di quelli.
Sosteniamo le donne e gli uomini impegnati nello sviluppo delle imprese e delle attività professionali, con il desiderio di affrontare le sfide imprenditoriali, sociali e culturali del nostro tempo, contribuendo al bene comune. Compagnia delle Opere. Un criterio ideale. Un'amicizia operativa. cdo.org.
Civiltà dell'amore, fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Buonasera a tutti, iniziamo questo.
Good evening, everybody. We'll start our encounter this evening with the title, Work a Vocation. This encounter was born from many provocations that have emerged in relationship with work, and in particular that explode in the post-pandemic time. Some questions came up in this work, many very signed by what we are looking for today in work. It seems that maybe salary and career are no longer enough. The older people say that the young are fragile, young people affirm to want something other, they ask for something better, or on the other hand, they don't desire to construct. The pandemic marked a revolution in the relationships in work and in relationship with work. But what's in play is not just new business or personal strategies, or even differences between generations. But for everyone, work is a test bench of the consistency of their own life. What is the meaning of work? What realizes me? Why is it worth making a sacrifice to work and to realize yourself? We wanted to bring in our guests on this to look at these questions, these provocations, and how they live, both from the point of view of an employer, or a leader, or a worker, or a young person who's entering the world of work. It's true for everyone, and the pandemic imposed this in a provocatory way on everybody. The relationship between the private life and work life. Is work a parenthesis to let you have time to live, or is it part of the challenge of life? These are some questions which our guests are going to answer, we hope. And we have people from the institutional, from small and large enterprises here. I'll start straight away. From Lucia, who's the Undersecretary from the Ministry of the Economy and of Finance. To whom I'll ask what might be a reaction that, with respect to what you've discovered working and even later on as in institutional side. Thank you, everybody. Good evening to everybody. I greet you all these companions on my journey in this one. I'm very moved this evening, and maybe a bit shocked, because for many years I've seen I've walked these corridors, these pavilions as a visitor at the meeting, and I've never thought I would be here speaking, giving a reflection and a testimony. And already the fact that I'm here at this moment says that a bit work is a vocation. It's interesting, this affirmation with the question mark. It is a question mark. Work is a vocation, so I had to work to verify how much in my own life this was actually true. How real is it? And so I start from two considerations. One from St. John Paul II, who says that work can be considered in the, he said in laborem exercens, that work can be considered like a time in which the vocation is formed, because we are called to it as a duty, a moral obligation, from the construction of common good, and also as a unalienable right. And Pope Francis says the same thing. We're called to work from our own creation. Work is a necessity. It's part of this meaning of life on this world, on this earth, and a condition for human development. And so I started to think of how much this can be in my own life. I'm mum, I'm a wife, I can't deny all these things, but I've done many experiences of work before coming to take up this role. I graduated in economics, did a course in business administration, in society and consultancies, did work there. Then I decided to do a private business and to open a studio of consultancies, and I found myself, I was called to teach, and so I taught for many years in high schools. I taught computers and business, and this was pretty much my journey in work. So what did I seek every time that I came in some way that bumped up against work? So with great curiosity, I sought always the beauty that was inside that work, that in some way I could find myself. This was a bit the key to the journey in all these years. And so I want to recount an episode that has to do with this intervention of mine. When I was invited to the meeting, I had a few discussions with people, because I deal with economy. I'm in the Ministry of Economy and Finance, economy, tax. Maybe one day we can talk about that, but this isn't the moment. So I was called to talk about work, and so I called up the person who invited me and said, why did you invite me? Work isn't my speciality, let's say. It's not my core business, as we say. I deal with other stuff. And they said, but still, it's interesting, given your journey. And I said, okay, I'm mumbling a bit. After a quarter of an hour, he called me back and said, listen, I've reflected. It's all life that I've put things in my head, and the life asks something else of me. And sometimes I'm a bit recalcitrant on this. And then I end up following. I try and take it seriously, what's proposed to me. And so, in consequence, I said, okay, let's talk about work. And for me, this was a great learning moment, because I could look again and see what has constantly happened to me in life. And so, let's talk about work. We can talk about work. I found myself then to have to deal with this work, this one that I'm doing right now, this role I'm doing now in the government, because I was called to it. I was called to it, and looking at the time, I've nearly finished. I was called to it, and at a certain point, with a bit of surprise and trepidation, I said yes. It happened in 2018, when it was asked by somebody who I actually saw in the room here, to become a candidate. And so was a candidate in the political elections, and I looked at myself, how I am, if this responded really to a desire of mine, to a vocation of mine, we could say. And I said, maybe a little bit with trepidation, and I said, yes, okay. And then nothing happened because I was the second in the list, so I didn't imagine in any way that I'd actually get elected. And being called this way almost by chance. Instead, a couple of years later, the pandemic happened, regional elections and so on. I ended in the parliament halfway through the legislature, and so I'm there since 2020 in full pandemic, and so I've lived this experience there, and I took it as like I've always done at work, with seriousness, curiosity, knowing what is the responsibility that I have as a parliamentarian. So I did this work for 2 years. I'll say just this, that I wanted to be in a commission, in one, and obviously they put me in a different one. That's the story of life. And in that commission, I worked right up until this year, until I was called to be here, without looking for it myself, to become Undersecretary at the Ministry of the Economy. And right, this is my experience, the experience of my story, and it's the key through which I look at and I verify, I seek to face what's proposed to me. Thank you. Thank you. I'll do it. We'll go now to Alberto, who, although apart from suffering the heat more than me, he's a businessman in the wine industry, in the Cantina Paltrinieri in Modena. He does the work which has to do with, and all his business is played out with external factors to face, and which he needs to respond to, like right now, as we said. Quindi, so we're going from the institutional side to a little industry, who has to do with the challenges of weather, of the international markets, etc. And so, with all this, how do you face all this?
Grazie. C'è anche un grande pubblico.
There's even a great audience here. So, first of all, thank you everyone. I've never sweated this much in my life, but that's fine. Thank you everyone, because for this opportunity to try and answer to these big questions that we've raised now, and that are important, especially for me to talk about. And so, very briefly, what do I do? Technically speaking, I'm a winologist, so that way you'll learn a new word here. That means, simply speaking, that I'm someone that makes wine starting from their own grapes. And this describes the kind of small reality I've got. We're in the north of Modena. We make Lambrusco wine in a reality that we didn't make, and by that I mean myself and my wife. And it's since 1998, since 2000, that we started working like this. But rather than that, it was founded first by my grandfather, more or less a century ago, and handed down by to my father and my mother. So it's something that we kind of landed ourselves into. So what strikes me when I kind of try and answer this question? Let's say on the topic of trying to see, with respect to my work, what emerges. So surely, what you mentioned just a second ago as you introduced me, is that the kind of work I do makes me kind of realize that I'm in a situation that is common to many people, that probably because my work is tied to the earth, it becomes even more clear, and that is of dependency. That's to say, we're under the sun. That is, even no matter what we may want, things go awry, and that's not necessarily of our own willing, of our own desire. When we try and gather the fruits of our labor, but it's an operation that begins far longer before, that goes from when you sow the seeds, when you cultivate. So we don't, one often doesn't imagine, it's not it's not that we don't have a strategy, that we look at the reality of that plant and figure out what we want to do with it, but it can always happen that for whatever kind of small shift in climate, all of it can either get completely razed to the ground or rendered useless, or as, with hail, or you could have a hailstorm or something, or it can be all kind of thrown into question with aspects later down the road. And I think about the experience that I've had, even though thankfully my farm wasn't damaged, the experience of a recent earthquake in 2012, and the most recent experience, that of the pandemic, where these are all situations where we're really forced to kind of look at ourselves and ask, so for who am I working? Who am I working for? What am I doing? Why am I working? Because for as long as things go well, then this question is kind of more hidden. But when, and I assure you, hail is a really kind of devastating thing in this aspect. It destroys everything. When there comes a moment when you have to stop and think that you might have just lost everything, and that the effects of what's happening aren't even, that you can't even begin to start measuring what's just happened. It's not a question of economic damage, obviously, as for every, for all of our property, that suffers an event of this kind, there's that aspect, but there's a tide to that good that you feel it in an even more dramatic sense, that that when you lose everything in an instant. So you're forced to question, who do I work for? Why do I do what I do? All these sacrifices I've made until now. And it's a question that's always very dramatic. It's not one that you can answer immediately, and in fact it's usually anger is the response to curse. But from my experience, every time an event like that has happened, it's always been an opportunity for me, and they've become, in the long term, always a resource for me, an opportunity to learn something new about my work and about myself. And so if I think about, for example, the relationship with the consultants we have, the agroeconomists, it happened after a huge hailstorm that we'd never seen before. And this kind of relationship is something that really makes a difference in what we do. I could tell you 1,000 different examples on this topic, but for example, everything of all the themes that the pandemic dug up, that it brought up in us and that affected us and everyone we work with. Well, regardless, those are the options. You either cry over what's happened, or you how can I say it, you try and open your eyes and see if there's something for you can gain something from what's just happened. Very quickly, talking about the business itself, like I said, we didn't found it. It was something that we kind of found ourselves into. And when something lands on your lap like that, it's called a gift. It's something that was gifted to us, in my case by my father, who, after I'd finished studying, he told me that, it had been after about 1.5 years I was working with him, he asked me, do you feel like picking up this work? And he said, well, I don't know, we'll see. So thinking about everything that's happened in these past 25 plus years, my whole world changed. The world of wine and the world, the context we work in, and the business. We started from a production that involved we kind of had a single reference point, and that's a reality that that now we make 8 different types of wine. So we've always been using the same wine, the wine of my father. We've just diversified now. The commercial channels have been completely turned head over heels, whereas my father may have had in his day maybe a clientele that was 99 or 95% final clients or direct consumers. Now we maybe sell 40% to the we sell abroad now a lot more than we did back then. You know, back in my day, my father didn't have guided tours of the winery, but now we have someone whose job is directly just to do that. So, you know, many things have changed over the years. If I look at myself and I try and kind of be aware of what all these changes have meant to me, it's honestly I can't really can't say it's been nothing short of been trying to get to the bottom of what we've lived through, and it's been nothing short of an amazing opportunity, including all the kind of things that we've not exactly wanted to have happened. Thank you.
So now from a little business to a big multinational, in which the risk of many people, and so the challenge of so many people to understand the young people come in, or the needs of the work more broadly. So now we'll talk to Sonia Malaspina, who's the head of human resources at Danone, a company we all know. Both in Italy and Greece, and as well as being this manager, is also a writer. She wrote her own book with a very provocative title, we can say. And so I'd like to ask how, in a big company like yours, the person can be put to the centre of this challenge. Thank you. It's an honour and a pleasure for me to be here now, and I wanted to say maybe the subtitle of my book, the original dismissal. So the pandemic gave me a chance to describe an experience that started in Danone in 2011. I've worked for decades, in fact, with people leaving work in human resources. I've never conceived a separate professional work, family life. I've always tried to find a way to conciliate these ones. And so with this spirit, we get to the Melin division, so children's baby food. So I always talk about mums and babies and so on. And they're 50% of the population that's women. So with what spirit do I find this myself with these people? It's a mix of resignation, anger, fear, resignation, because their presence is at the base of the pyramid. There are roles that certainly can't be filled by women, it seems, because the area manager needs to sleep away from home. A woman can't manage herself on this. On anger, because women who look for part-time to look after their children, and the company says no. Or fear of women, of young women, that they want to have a child, but they're scared of the return to work. So I say to myself, this company must be the paradise of mothers and dads. So I was still in the trial period, and I went to my boss about this, and I said to him, you're going to lose 50% of productivity, because the sentiment of these people in the business immediately turns into lower output. So I give a business type discussion, not just niceness or whatever. And I said, okay. They said to me, okay, yeah, 50% of the people is quite a lot, yeah. Let's see what we can do. And so with my team, with the representatives of the unions, of the women's unions, etc., we put down 10 rules from pure common sense, and we do a revolution on these. In 12 years, we applied these rules in a ferocious way, I'll say very proudly. What happened? The first data point, 8% birth rate in the company in 500 people. I take as like the statistical organizations, the number of kids born every year divided by the number of dads and mums between in the right age band. You can do this work. The 29 to 45-year-old. The company didn't go bankrupt, didn't fail, because this work from women gives a fundamental contribution to the company. But even the dads change as well, because if I can see some of these rules, the first rule is the psychoaffective closeness. So I go to these new mums and I say that your experience has a value for you, but also for us as a company. So in your maternity leave, you're going to develop managerial and professional competencies that are amazing, like think of dealing with emergencies, your capacity to delegate, empathy, listening. In a digital world that's hyper-connected like ours, you'll develop fundamental skills, not just the mums, but also the dads who look after the children. They develop this too. So one day, we have 1 day of paternity leave that used to be given, and now we have 10. And I've always been encouraged, and I made it obligatory 20 days. Back then I started with 5 days, and then we built it up because there was enthusiasm, went up to 20. And I oblige the dads to do this because they must do that experience of detachment from work, which is hard. I've seen that. I've lived it. For my own child, when I had to detach myself from work, it's painful, but you need to do it and discover what it means to look after someone. Parenting is a fundamental thing. We're not on holiday when you're on parental leave. You come back different. You understand what it means. The sharing of the responsibility between man and woman. The dads come back. They love doing this without being discriminated or laughed at around the coffee machine. And so, next to this, which is listening, then there's the economic support, welfare. The company welfare is an instrument there, but also including the mums inside the tribunals, etc. So if somebody becomes a mum, that's something I have to consider positively. And so to fill that pay gap, which we often complain about, truly, because if you don't consider the mums within the salary discussions, then, yeah, that's just going to widen. So the other thing from the organizational point of view, if things aren't checked, then fundamental times in the life of their children, the parents need to be there. But if we, and now with digital tools have shown that's possible, like we saw in the pandemic. And so you can see that these rules, they're on my site, www.danone.it, the policy's there. It's done its own path. It's gone around the world in Danone, this thing, on 100,000 people. But our work has an impact, my work, and I spend a lot of time to education, to transmit to colleagues, and now also in other companies and organizations, that we have a great responsibility. Our work has an impact on the life of people, on their families. So we move the birth rate, if you like, with our own work. I don't know how much time I've got. Almost half a minute. And so this is a bit what I wanted to recount to you. And above all, the capacity to attract and keep people within a company, the people you value. Above all, after COVID, people want to work in a company that has meaning, that they think they're thinking holistically, not just from a point of view of their own work, but a human point of view, that personal one, family one, finally. And guess? They don't go away. Treated like that, they don't go away. They don't go away from that sort of place. In 2020, we launched a policy that that looks after a different part of the society, that old parents, that those is there in all of our organizations, and this, I wanted to share that with you. Thank you. I think that you'll have difficulty leaving the Fiera without the number of CVs going to be handed to you. But now we understand how it's not an ethical problem, but a problem of how you engage, produce, how you link up with the economy. So that the economical context also has a meaning for the social enterprises, which today expresses really the content of a constructing within work that's a non-profit or a profitable industry. We'll now talk to Enzo, who works at the Paranza Cooperative in Naples. It's a social enterprise in the healthcare sphere that he'll help us see immediately a video that describes their reality.
So I'll share this reality. I thought that I'd share a few images with you, as other people have already spoken. You know, it's so hot here and we might be tired, so hopefully the other rooms have aircon, so hopefully I'll just share a few pictures to make things easier. Paranza was
spontanea dalla volontà di un gruppo di ragazzi di riscattare il proprio quartiere. Le prime attività erano i tour nel rione, i tour guidati nella catacomba di San Gaudioso. All'inizio è stato difficile, le sconfitte erano anche quotidiane, cioè lavorare in un quartiere di cui si parla sempre male. Era difficile trovare ogni volta una forza nuova, una motivazione nuova per continuare, e in questo ha giocato molto Padre Antonio Loffredo. Nel 2008 abbiamo partecipato a un bando della Fondazione Con il Sud per la rivalutazione di un monumento abbandonato che potesse creare occupazione nel territorio circostante. E sapevamo che qui c'erano le catacombe di San Gennaro, semi abbandonate perché gestite con difficoltà direttamente da Roma, dal Vaticano, e pensammo di proporci per far sì che anche le catacombe di San Gennaro potessero diventare una porta aperta verso il quartiere.
Adesso, grazie alla vostra presenza, questo quartiere sta cambiando faccia. Voi da oggi siete inconsapevolmente parte di questo progetto, perché anche grazie ai vostri biglietti che non solo si genera lavoro, ma perché la vostra presenza incoraggia tanti altri. Si genera un indotto positivo nel commercio, nelle attività all'esterno della catacomba, si genera anche un esempio positivo per i tanti ragazzi che magari immaginavano di non avere futuro qui, che l'unico futuro potesse essere altrove o potesse essere quello di una deriva negativa.
La magia di questo luogo è molto semplice, è quella di avere una stratificazione così grossa che arriva come tempo a Ninive, a Babilonia, ma a differenza di quei luoghi, lì sono rovine da visitare. Qui è una vita che vive in questi siti che ancora vengono vissuti da gente, questa è la particolarità.
Il valore aggiunto è l'incontro con le persone, cioè l'incontro con noi. Ognuno di noi ha una storia da raccontare. Ha fatto sì che all'interno di questo bel sogno ci fosse la possibilità di costruire la storia personale di ognuno di noi, perché la cooperativa La Paranza nasce per dare un'opportunità ai giovani.
Prendere queste pietre che normalmente agli occhi dei tecnici possono essere scartate per delle imprese così importanti, per noi sono risultate testate d'angolo. Questo significa che il welfare che noi pensiamo non è quello assistenzialistico, è quello che va a promuovere la persona, sicuri che tutti possono essere testate d'angolo di un sistema che non va a soccorrere, anzi li soccorre promuovendoli.
Oggi siamo 14 soci rispetto ai 6 iniziali e in 16 anni abbiamo creato 44 posti di lavoro e recuperato 13.000 metri quadrati di patrimonio.
Grazie.
Thank you very much. So there's a new, actually an update I'd like to make, because now we've made actually 53 new jobs. We trying to aim to get to 60 by the end of the year. Just so we can understand, how many of you people have you already been involved in something like what we do, or have you heard of us? Like I said, it's an expert public here. So for all of you, everyone else, this is an invite to come and visit us. You've briefly heard a synthesis of our story and of the work we do, and the work we tried to do in the sacristy of the Santa Maria della Sanita's Basilica. When we started at the beginning, this kind of initially was an amateur activity with our volunteers who are kind of like Indiana Jones. When visitors would come in and grab their bags and look around, they'd say, "Wow, congratulations, you're doing great work here." We leave you this phrase from Saint Augustine, which is, "Be brave to face how things are and have the courage to change them." And so we continue to repeat this phrase to ourselves, and we've tried to repeat it to ourselves even during the pandemic. The moment when kind of point in time when work was frozen, we tried to work as hard as we could, even though the number of visitors had crumbled to zero. It's a story, as you've heard, and where the rejected stones had become the cornerstones, and in this sense, that's the fruit of the work we do. Not only do we create jobs, we respond to this desire of the desire for what people want, which is work. The work I do has allowed me to answer to a very important question I had when I became an adult, and that was, what do I do when I grow up? And I think it's a question many young people are asking themselves right now. What do I want to do when I grow up? Do I want to change city? Do I stay in mine? In our case, it was a social enterprise that we run has allowed us to use our own energy in our own land. It's allowed us to stay in our city. It's allowed us to change ourselves and to change the community we live in. 70% of the young workers in our cooperative are from our neighborhood. 30% of them, and the remaining, feel adopted by our community. We live in a context where youth unemployment is at 60%, and 40% of children leave school early. These are Civil War level statistics. So in this context, what's the solution? How do we answer this question? How did I answer the question? What do I do as an adult? I start with what I have, and those are the extraordinary people. And Don Giuseppe reminded us the whole time, and what we always reminded ourselves that you become human or you lose. We got involved. We tried to give our best. We didn't even have to pay that many salaries. There were so many volunteers that rushed to us. The historic and artistic heritage we have helps generate work, and since then, that's what we've been doing. We started from the resources of the experts would call it's a bottom-up process, and we like this term. It's a term that wasn't given down from on high, from great ideas from outside who didn't belong to our community, but rather it's our community that it creates its own destiny, that commits itself, as I said at the beginning, and as Pope Francis said in introduction to the meeting, we have to give our lives to others, and this gives meaning to our work. So the mission of our cooperative has become to create work more and more in a context that seems to be hostile, but in reality, if we remove the blindfold from our eyes, there's an infinite number of resources out there. And right now, we're living in this reality, and we are one of the small certainties in this context. Our community is changing around us. Who's visited it has seen that despite the problems that continue to exist, it's a district that dreams and hopes of a new future, and we've been able to achieve this thanks to the work that previously wasn't there. You can imagine that we find ourselves in this situation in many contexts. There was always a mentality of we've always done things this way. Nothing can change. We've always done things this way. But however, young people now aren't happy with this way of talking and thinking. thanks to some very important visions inspired by people like Don Antonio, have started to believe in their own skills and their own ability. And thanks to that, we always say, how can we give opportunities to young people? We give them our trust, because trust was given to us, and we have the duty to give trust on. The most difficult moment is the moment in which we have to choose the future workers who will join our cooperative. And often, almost always, we don't choose the most kind of qualified curriculum, rather we choose the most motivated person. This is because maybe later the person chooses to go to uni or to specialize themselves. And 40% of the workers in our cooperative have improved their own level of education after having worked with us. So that's why, in our case, work is on two levels. It has people at the center, and that's how the young people stay in our community and improve their community. Thank you.
So we won't move too far from Naples. The last intervention for this trip round with Stefania, who's the General Secretary of the Christian Union of Executives and Entrepreneurs. But she's also a Knight of Work and also the Vice President of a Coelmo metallurgical industry in Naples. She spent her whole life constructing, giving work, and building up her businesses. And that has dealt with many victories, many battles, many tricky situations. And she's overcome a lot of things. So also in her responsibility with regard to the young people, like Enzo was talking about, we'd ask you your contribution. So good evening, everybody. I'm really happy to be here. Above all, leave compliments to these young people who over the years I've seen growing, and they're very close to them. UCID, the Christian Union of Executives, what's it do? Directors, executives, entrepreneurs. We need to talk about entrepreneurialism, bringing businesses into existence. In the social teachings of the church. Many years ago, when I started to talk about the gospel at work, you can imagine back in 60 or 65, going into metal works, you can imagine where it's like I hadn't been to the great business schools. The first thing that I taught up until a few years ago. Sorry, I'm listening.
L'ingresso per I dirigenti e l'ingresso per I lavoratori.
So the executives think and the workers work. This was the theory of business at the time. When I came back to our business, I run my own business. I didn't see that. I thought this isn't the reality. And at one point during a class in business school, I asked, have you ever worked in a business? Have you seen a business live and thrive? A business is a living organism. It thrives. It's made of people who, in this case, are, for example, social cooperatives. But in our case, it's kids who believe, who have believed. And in our business, you have to take care of people. And we speak of things like fraternity, neighborliness, being involved, friendship. These were impossible terms to conceive for these people in business school. And you have to take care of the people you work with. We know how many problems can come up, sickness, problems that need to be dealt with. And looking after is giving yourself as a gift to others. So what do businesses need to do? They need to erase all these old theories of management that have existed in the past. We need to remove this idea, this division between those who think and those who work, because this isn't how businesses work. Because nowadays, when you call a kid who's terrified by COVID, by everything he's lived, by this scary world, young people are afraid of the world that we've handed to them. It burns, it's horrible, you can't trust it, there's war. What outlook do they have on work, to these young kids who join our business? They think about their own future, but we need to help them. Kids like these believe in their own future. So what we need to think is, when they work in a business, and I refer myself to the many business people, as we're doing now, as part of a Christian Union of Executives, we have to change the mentality. And I tell you honestly that this bears fruit when you listen. When teaching institutions come, in big studies, when they come and talk to us, the first thing they do is they make organograms. And believe me, if you walk through our building, if you talk with one of your co-workers, and to see them excluded from the great organogram, what would they think? Could they point themselves out on that chart? And it's a terrible thing if that happens. If they can't see themselves represented, they don't feel like they're an active participant in the work they do. And this is what we're discovering. It's unfortunate for me to say that we're only just discovering this now. I've always done it. I've always, like you said, I've always given to everyone, made everyone feel important in our own business, so that even the discarded stone becomes the cornerstone. Because when you talk to one of your colleagues and you tell them, so why do you work? Why do you stay here in this business? My friends, if your colleague cannot reply to you because they don't know what they're doing, this person isn't working for your business. They're simply doing something, every task. They're just carrying on, moving on. Businesses are something else. They're alive. When you involve people directly, and these are kind of the new theories that are coming out. We're talking about this a lot recently. We're talking about social responsibility of businesses. We're talking about indexes who asks businesses to grant credit to the UN SDGs with governance, sustainable governance of climate change. It seems to me like it's what we're often called pinkwashing or greenwashing. That is, that all businesses are saying that they're wonderful, lovely people and they do everything well. And I call this the theory of the picked flowers. We see some wonderful flowers, and if we were to pick them and put them in our houses, businesses say, look, we're wonderful people. We do so many great things. I do social welfare. I lend money. We do theatre. I give things, benefits to my workers. But then when you go and look at these flowers that you've decided to pick, they dry out. They wither and die. Much of this is just a farce. We need to start working directly in the spirits of our workers. For everyone, executives, bosses, whoever we are, we need to understand who's sat next to us, who's next to us in an office, in a business, in whatever workplace we have. You have a real person that you need to listen to understand, to make an active participant in what you're doing. This sense of brotherhood, of unity, that we've had to wait for the Pope to say it, to introduce this. That we've had to wait for the Pope to talk about this. When I was first working, we renewed the metallurgy contract we were doing. That's the most important one you have to renew every year. We would write this work, renewal. We didn't want to put a single cent more in the payslip. We wanted to understand, what do our workers actually need? And that there, for the first time, was born our welfare program, which now, unfortunately, we need to engage with. And it seemed like it's died a bit. In my business, for example, for the first time, we introduced we engaged in some interviews. We asked our partners, our employees, so what do you need? What can I do to help you, and to help you be a bit more comfortable in life? We had some incredible requests come through. Young people want one thing, mothers want another. They wanted female workers want something else, then this made us realize that you need to listen, you need to understand. When you talk about fraternity, friendship, the Pope told us to take on board this friendship and take a bit of your life, put a bit of your life in the lives of others. And this isn't just a question of recipes, of bosses, of young workers. These are kind of recipes for life, help, being together. Because we've understood that only by working like this, only through this, can we finally be able to see some benefits and get through things. It's part of what we've recommended to young people when they come into the business. They don't know how to work. That is, beyond in helping them, we need to teach them what it means to work. We talk about honest work, obviously, but we teach them to make their work honest, to give back, and that's how everyone grows. Because when we teach them how to make their work something dignified, that way, when you ask them how are you working, why are you working the way you are, that's how people start taking care of their community. How many of my workers do I see make an error, and when I ask them why are you doing things this way, they stop, they freeze and say, I don't know. Do you know you're ruining this, you're breaking this, you're doing this wrong? Why don't you do it well? Why don't you do it as it's meant to be done? Believe me, it's difficult, but this is how you make things flourish. We made our business flourish. We expanded our own people, and thanks to their collaboration, we've had some incredible participation, some incredible enthusiasm, and it doesn't matter if you fit in the organogram, forget about it, erase it. What we want is that the people who think, as we said back in the day, are side by side with those who work. The thought and the practical action become one, so that everyone works together. We unify these two ideas, because the success of a business ultimately comes down to our partners, to our employees. That is the real success of a business. When we have them around us, when we see them grow, when we share something with them, that's when a business can define itself, as you hear all the time, as a sustainable business. And who knows what sustainable business actually means, but this is a good example. A business that maintains the promises it makes and doesn't simply put lies on the front page.
Okay, I'll let the time get used up, I'm afraid, by Dr. Essa, but we'll do a little quick round. First to the Undersecretary. So you've said that you find yourself cocky in front of the things. You need to challenge the administrators, and often this common experience is that the conditions of work that I find myself seem to me not satisfying. I don't know how to respond to what they don't respond to what I am. Two roads, you said. Or crying about it, or having courage to take it up, to have these, to go into the depths of the thing. Quickly, you three. 1 minute each. We've got this countdown in front of us that's stressing us all. Okay, listening is very important. It's one of the important points which are in all of the interventions that I heard. That listening phase that lets you have clear ideas so you can act. In our case, it's almost taken for granted because a story of friendship. A colleague was also a friend, and so then you manage to face a discourse that's constructive with a content that takes you to the final objective. From my side, conviction. The conviction, I didn't have data, I couldn't present something like that when I gave my rules out, when I made my proposal. The conviction that female work is fundamental, and so my book serves as encouragement. Just because I've done it, a colleague, if I've done it, another HR colleague can do it. I think that the contribution of each one can be that of trying it, of giving your own contribution, because not saying I can't do this, I can't do that, but of limiting yourself. We need to push yourself beyond your own limits. But personally, for me, it's always been the possibility of relationships, which have always helped me look upwards. The friendship, the inexhaustible friendship that we see here, the title of the meeting, for me is this: the possibility that you have next to you someone, for me, first of all, it's my wife, and then my friends. But also think about at the start, the provoking words of my friend Enzo, who said, but if you put yourself like this with your father, don't think you'll be able to do whatever. Or otherwise, it's a paradox. Do it or don't do it. So what I've seen is this, and this puts me into it with a tension. Not so much a hunger to arrive, but really a tension to make possible things that are impossible. We've gained a minute for you, Dottoressa. How do you find this courage not to change work, but to change what's in front of you? Having the fortune to stay in a company where we think that saying your own opinion is not cause for being sacked. Okay, I wanted to give the last minutes to the question, all these experiences that we do. It's also a challenge that these can become a governing action, that there could be something that asks from you guys who are in the governing of a country to think about some solution. I don't know if it's minimum salary. I don't know if that's the thing that gives meaning to work. So what are the challenges that you see in front of the experiences that you've met and done? So thanks for all these contributions that we've heard. They were truly interesting, important, and they've contributed to a reflection. I'll try to responding to your question, and then I'll try and to sum it up. So we've seen that, we've all noticed there was a pandemic, and the attitudes that we have, and sometimes our fears to reflect it. I think of a song that we've heard that underlines this, that made me recall this, and it's a song that says, "The time has come to leave space to those who say that to those to whom time and space is never given." So maybe the pandemic left us this need to give more space and more time, because we had hunger for a long time. But maybe we need to reflect on how this time and this space, we want to use it. And if work comprehends this time and space, or is it outside of it, of this time and space that we want? In some realities, it seems that we need to work to then have a bit of time and free time and space. And maybe this is a key, perhaps, to look at. Maybe as see, maybe the challenge is maybe that, like Pope Francis said, and St. John Paul, the work can be considered only a means of survival that's instrumental and functional to then let me use my free time, free space the way I want, or it contributes to create my personality. And so this seeking for well-being, which we see very important, a searching in which we can find our own good, our own well-being within our life that is made of our work. Young people are aware of this. Have we managed to pass on what is our way of looking at work? And here I'm speaking also of institutions. And at the level of our nation, we've grown up like this. This is our work within the various fields that were left to us by our fathers, and that we must preserve for our own children, for our children. And this is our attention in this moment, that we do things so that this awareness can grow. I think there's 1.7 million NEETs, the people who are not in education or training or employment. 1.7 million people. Maybe some reflection on this we need to do. Very often, in the face of an undignified salary, the work isn't accepted because you think you seek something good. You don't, and you look and people don't make a sacrifice. These politics that have led us to work on citizenship, to sustain as a response to the need of work. It's not the politics that can, or politicians that can pass on our culture of work, that can grow and educate this thing. Because educating, as we said, and Monsignor Zuppi said, His Eminence, it's really educating is drawing forth that which we really are, making it grow, and this is what we seek to do in work. And so for this it's necessary to have an important action on school. We do the various things there. School, between school and work, mixing those up. It's fundamental to say that every person has a value, and the work is also a value in itself. And so if work is a value for itself, it's not that we can stigmatize it with a minimum value, like a salary that has a minimum value. It's not as simple as that to respond to complex problems. To complex problems, we need to respond with deep and articulated solutions. So we need reflection. More than minimum pay, it's about a poor work. So resolving the problems of poor work. And it seems that in our friends here, we heard maybe some of the answers. And I'll say one of the phrases that I heard many times from President Meloni is that phrase from St. Augustine about courage. But I want to complete it, because the phrase from St. Augustine says that the courage and disdain are children of hope. Hope has two children: the disdain, the anger to looking at things, and the courage to change them. And this is what we're trying to do. Thank you. Okay, so I thank our guests. Clearly, the countdown time has conditioned about what we could do, and they want to get us out. But let me read the message, that's at the end of all the encounters. In many cultures, where love becomes reciprocal. The meeting itself is born from a friendship and that continues to bet everything on the relationship with the other. Each of us can give their own contribution that's decisive to make the meeting, even this year, a testimony of a friendship which wants to spread itself to become friendship among peoples and cultures. To sustain the meeting can be the expression of a co-responsibility in the construction of an important place that serves the world. A civilization doesn't grow without culture. Dialogue and beauty are its vital lymph. The meeting has always been a place of culture. Each one of us can contribute to this great story. Through all of the fiera, you'll see the Dona Ora points with the red heart sign, where you can donate, and or speak to the volunteers who have the Dona Ora T-shirt. The meeting, those who sustain the meeting can use the tax benefits in their tax declaration. So we even get into tax affairs here. But thank you to all our guests. Today, an important hypothesis of work came out that is responsibility for those who work and challenge for those who face it. To give courage and hope to this hypothesis, we need the participation of each one of us. I thank you all, thank our guests here, and we can continue the dialogue. Thank you.
La civiltà dell'amore, fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Il senso religioso o l'esperienza religiosa è innanzitutto un fatto, un fenomeno obiettivo, un fatto reale, non è un'idea, innanzitutto non è un modo di sentire, non solo si tratta di un fatto, di un avvenimento, ma del fatto più imponente e più inestirpabile della storia dell'uomo. Più imponente, più vasto, che neanche il fenomeno dell'amore dell'uomo e della donna, che neanche il fenomeno del rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perché il senso religioso è un avvenimento che pone, che afferma o che ricerca l'orizzonte entro il quale acquisti senso anche il rapporto tra l'uomo e la donna, anche il rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perciò è più vasto, perfino di quelli.
Sosteniamo le donne e gli uomini impegnati nello sviluppo delle imprese e delle attività professionali, con il desiderio di affrontare le sfide imprenditoriali, sociali e culturali del nostro tempo, contribuendo al bene comune. Compagnia delle Opere. Un criterio ideale. Un'amicizia operativa. cdo.org.
Il senso religioso o l'esperienza religiosa è innanzitutto un fatto, un fenomeno obiettivo, un fatto reale, non è un'idea. Innanzitutto non è un modo di sentire, non solo si tratta di un fatto, di un avvenimento, ma del fatto più imponente e più inestirpabile della storia dell'uomo. Più imponente, più vasto che neanche il fenomeno dell'amore dell'uomo e della donna, che neanche il fenomeno del rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perché il senso religioso è un avvenimento che pone, che afferma o che ricerca l'orizzonte entro il quale acquisti senso anche il rapporto tra l'uomo e la donna, anche il rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perciò è più vasto, perfino di quelli.
Sosteniamo le donne e gli uomini impegnati nello sviluppo delle imprese e delle attività professionali, con il desiderio di affrontare le sfide imprenditoriali, sociali e culturali del nostro tempo, contribuendo al bene comune. Compagnia delle Opere. Un criterio ideale. Un'amicizia operativa. cdo.org